Good evening and welcome to the Special Planning Commission and City Council Workshop, December 20th. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is now called to order. Can we do a roll call, Victoria, please?
Mayor Wiley,
Yes, here.
Councilmember Ayers,
Here.
Councilmember Milan,
Here.
Councilmember Moffitt,
Here.
Councilmember Albert,
Here.
Chair Cusera,
Here.
Mr. Adia, Ms. Benton, Mr. Jacobson, Mr. McHale, Ms. Prowse, Ms. Scripture,
Here.
Mr. Shepherd,
Here.
Mr. Watson.
The record show that Ms. Benton has arrived. I'd like to introduce Mr. Carlito Young, who's our mediator this evening. Let him open the floor.
Hello, everybody. Let me first tell you who I am. My name is Carlito Young. I'm from the law firm of Rosati Schultz in Jopik. I was called in, it's been a while, I was called in, I believe, late July about a FOIA request that was made to the city from a member of the Planning Commission. And when I looked at this FOIA request and I looked at who it was coming from, I realized this was a difficult one. There's an issue here. And when I see these FOIA requests, there's usually two scenarios you have. You have a political fight that will never be resolved and is just for the fight, or you have somewhere where there's a lack of communication between two respective bodies within a community. I felt it was the latter. I had a very nice discussion with Reese, if you don't mind calling Reese, and the clerk, and some discussions with the mayor as well, and I believe there was a communication situation that we had, a lack of communication and misunderstanding about issues. Reese, based upon our discussion, this FOIA was rescinded because the nature of the FOIA was an overwhelming FOIA. It's one of those FOIAs that's a paralyzing FOIA, one that makes clerks concerned. And lawyers like myself.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. That's Jim McHale. Should I answer for Jim McHale? Hi, Jim. Everybody wonders if you're coming.
Which is one of the names on the things.
To the Planning Commission joint workshop with City Commission, or Council. Now. I would be on public camera, being recorded talking to you on TV. Yes, sir. Can we expect you? Okay, all right, thank you. He said he's on there.
Should we wait, or do you want me to?
No, we don't have to wait, no.
So we had this meeting, there was a discussion, I believe, in good faith, I believe this was something where there was a lack of communication and we could address this via speaking. Let me tell you how I was brought in. I do have a relationship with John Kingslip. I've worked with him for several years. The partners in my firm have worked with him for several years. I've represented this community several times in the past, so I have to work hand in hand with him as city attorney. John has been totally away from this whole issue ever since he handed it over to me. He has not provided any insight, nor have I asked him. One thing I've ever asked him is who are the parties, who are these people, and he identified those individuals to me. So John has not been involved in this. We discussed last night, briefly reminded, I asked him if he was going to be at this meeting, and he said no, and I said that was a good thing. And it was a good thing just because I think this discussion, it's not necessary for him to be here because really, he didn't really deal with this issue, it came to me very quickly. When we met with Reese, the clerk and I had picked the clerk quite simply because the clerk is the FOIA person, right? That's the FOIA person. Met with Reese because again, she was reasonable and she was willing to come and meet with us, and we had a good discussion. Had similar discussions with the mayor. I have not spoken to anyone else other than the clerk, the mayor, and Reese about any of the issues that are here. I just came to find out yesterday Mr. Haberman is here. So we've worked together in the past. I've never talked to him about this issue other than I'm here today. So I'm not going to seek any insight from him input, and nor is he from me because he doesn't know. But that's just the disclosure on our part. When I looked at this FOIA and I was talking to Reese, what I told her during this meeting, and I'll say again here, is I can't tell about the legal advice I provided how to answer the FOIA. There are some legal decisions that were made. There were some calls I had to make. Since I was retained by the city to look into this, I told her some of those items are privileged and I wouldn't get into details about that. And she understood that during the course of our discussion. I do know this. Some of the items that were requested in the FOIA request are present. They exist. They're not subject to disclosure because of the attorney-client privilege. Some of those documents were the legal opinions from the city attorney about certain issues, certain requests made by parties involved about keeping certain things confidential, or equally as important, a belief by certain people within the city that this information was to be kept confidential. And that is a lot of the reasons for certain things not being explained, certain documents not going out, and certain problems we were going to have if I had to answer that FOIA. It was not going to come out because we had to take the privilege and we wait. Reese, right, pursuant to the statute herself, if she wanted to challenge that in court, she could have, but we would have made our arguments and the judge would ultimately decide it. But those were decisions that were made because of confidentiality or belief in confidentiality. But with that being said, there was a process. There was a process here that I think we can talk about today, a process that was here, and we can bring up some issues and how do we move forward with this to not allow this lack of communication to occur or to try to reduce the chances of it occurring again. So what we talked about during our meeting, and let's talk to with the mayor afterwards, is that having this, where we're at right now, I would sit, you're not going to hear from me talking too much after this, but sit here and talk about expressing some issues, some concerns from both sides, talk about how do we communicate, think of some proposals, and move towards that goal towards the end. I am not going to give legal advice here today. I'm on camera, so therefore I cannot give that legal advice. You don't want any legal advice that I'm giving over the camera. But I do want to use this opportunity because I have confidence after speaking with Reese, speaking with the mayor, and reading this FOIA closely that I think we can start the process here. So I'm here today to try to assist you to do that.
I will defer you guys or the planning commission. I went through the concerns that were discussed about in the planning commission meeting and tried to find proposals that I thought may address some of those things and find solutions to some of those problems. So I'll just start and then we can go with the first one and then we can hash it out. In regard to communication and information coming from council to planning and information coming from planning to council. I propose that Susie Stepp, who's at your planning commission, that she could provide a summary of whatever's going on in the planning commission that she thinks that the city council needs to know. And for her to send a report by the following Monday to city council so that we could then have that information before the city council meeting is on Tuesday. And in reverse, Victoria Mitchell, who already takes care of the after the gavel, if, when she's working on that, if there's any information that she feels that was discussed in city council that needs to go to city planning, that she provides that summary and again, provide that the Monday before the planning commission meeting so that you guys have any of that pertinent information beforehand. I also think that, sometimes the background information may be important on, why council decided what we did or why the planning commission, what's the background. I thought that when that situation occurs that it's appropriate for myself, the mayor position or the chair to send an email to the parties to try to explain what the backstories were. Let's see, so that was trying to solve that problem. I wanted to address the problem with the legal counsel And again, proposing that Susie, as the planner, she's seeing all those documents before they're coming to the planning commission, that she provides some sort of document or summary to the legal counsel of the city to say these are what's coming up and these are probably the potential issues, so that he then is prepared and is aware that he should be present at a meeting and be ready to answer the questions that Susie thinks that may be a problem with. And maybe just, I don't, I know that the agenda's done the Thursday before, but I'm guessing she probably knows a little bit before then what's coming up soon and would be able to give him a quick, give him something to look at. The bonds, I wasn't really sure, maybe I described what what's not getting to you guys. And so, I thought if we, as a city, create a document that checks what's required of a bond, but I asked around, and typically a bond is still sought by the business owner, but, making sure that it checks all the boxes. And then those requirements should be given to whoever comes in as part of their package. Okay. And there's been, like the legal information that there are services that you're not getting, and it's making it harder to do your job. And I would like to just say that individuals or the chair, send an email to all of city council, the mayor, CC city council, and bring those things to light, because, again, communication, we aren't sure what you're not getting from the legal department or the planning department, or, just whoever it is not providing what you need. We don't know that. And so I just wanted to say, or maybe officially we say that's what you do, either, one of council, all of council, just the mayor, or, CC the city manager, just so that somebody knows. And I'd like somebody besides the city manager knowing from council, just so that we can hold the city manager accountable as far as, is it being done, is it being addressed, what have you done to address it, so that we'll try to meet your needs. Let's see. Proposing an annual wrap-up meeting at the end of the year, what worked, what didn't work, where can we improve, 2 biannual brainstorming sessions to try to be proactive on what needs to be done, what do we need to look at, an annual report, and an annual report is required, but when I talked to Mr. Pollock several months ago, there's not been one done in years. That's what he said.
I thought I saw in the minutes that there was one. The annual report comes at the end of the fiscal year, not the calendar year, I believe.
Because I'd asked him, and maybe I missed it because of the fact that I wasn't on, and so he said that he hadn't seen one for years. Maybe that's something that we just need to make a point to say our city planning service, city planner is responsible for. Maybe that's the building department. I'm just not sure who's ultimately responsible for it, because Mr. Pollock, what's that?
The annual report's the responsibility of us. Planning commission is responsibility.
It is, it's in the order, right, it is.
It's our responsibility.
It is, I just wasn't sure if that's where it's been at, so that's why I asked Mr. Pollock anyway, in the past, and he did not have an answer. What's my other things on here? Just, it was kind of more in the redevelopment ready items, looked at, nuclear PC, zoning boards, and even council members to be able to be encouraged or required to attend the training that's going to now be available every year by the city planning firm that we've hired, and PC, zoning board, and council members to attend the Roberts Rules and the OMA sessions that are available by the MML. I would assume that they have the Roberts Rules one available as well. There was one thing I just wanted. I think that's all I have.
I'm going to interject here, just on one issue that I think needs to be clarified for both sides. The legal counsel aspect, if you have a legal question, do we have a point person now for that? If they have someone they want to reach over here who they can reach out to? Or is it a situation where individuals can, they reach out to the city attorney directly? Because if it's that situation, it's problematic because then somebody might be left out.
I gotta interject here. I think we need to step back on the legal, the question, because it's way deeper than what we're talking about here. It is not just the answers we get when he's there incomplete, or when we ask for product, we don't get a good product. It is, I'll give it a perfect example. There is in, I think it was the August minutes, KingSep went to City Council with a memo about the sign ordinance, the commercial, political, and something about the Supreme Court in 2015 decision, and my God, this whole thing needs to get rewritten, and we need a moratorium, and they passed a resolution with a moratorium on political signs, and that the commercial sign thing was junk and had to be rewritten. There was flaws in it. Okay, we have never heard word one about that. It is not just we have questions and we're not getting them. There is things being pushed up through or brought up to City Council that is under our jurisdiction that should, at the very least, there's absolutely nothing wrong with bringing that up to City Council too. I mean, I'm not saying that there's a territorial thing, but that is our jurisdiction. So that has to come, I mean, if that memo's gonna go there, it should come to us too. If there's concerns that are gonna be raised about things that are under the jurisdiction that we are supposed to be writing ordinances for and looking at, those things should be coming to us too. The exact same thing happened with the lot split. That absolutely was right. It went to City Council where it was supposed to go, the conversation, but then after that, what was that? I can't remember. What was the thing? All of a sudden, they're saying they're gonna rewrite the large lot ordinance. That has never even been mentioned to us yet. It hasn't come, that's our ordinance that we wrote. And there was reasons for it, as was acknowledged by you and other people, and then I believe it was written by KingSep, who then stands up there and says it's a horrible ordinance. And I'm sorry, you don't get to just say rewrite it. They tell planning to rewrite it. Planning department, the administration. We still have not officially been taught or told or informed or anything about his legal opinion about these lot things, and it's our jurisdiction. This is way beyond he doesn't show up. This is way beyond we ask him for a product and it's garbage. That's deeper. That's more serious too.
Based upon this description, I certainly understand that, so the question comes back to here, how do you facilitate this process where this issue is here, how do we do that? I truly believe it starts with point people. Who is your point people to follow up with that? Who is the point person on your side? Who is the point person on this side that's going to receive that? Because,
but why didn't they be shared with us in the first place? There's nothing about that. If you can share it at City Council in an open meeting, why can't they be simultaneously shared with the Planning Commission?
That's a great question.
What is the big?
We can't answer what was in the past. I can't answer that in the past, but I can suggest what should remedy in the future, and it starts with point people. It starts with, if this is an issue that you're having, then it's something that you may have touched upon this with me before when we talked originally about
No,
some
this is
of the
actually
issues.
newer stuff.
Okay.
Well, that and the fact that
The one in
that whole
August?
sign ordinance thing.
It was,
No, the lot split just happened.
Okay. The one in August, one of them sounded,
yeah.
the sign ordinance sounded familiar, so it's starting with a point person to address issues that are within your purview, bringing it out to them, having that line of communication, what is the status of it? That is something that can be done. I've seen it in other communities, and it appears it's something that's lacking here. You just talk, I'm not calling on anybody, just everybody just jump in.
If I may offer, where are we in this role? Because the bottom line is I've got a department head that should be working with the Planning Commission. And if there are issues or questions that need to go to legal, he meets with me. I will contact legal and have them directly
But you're
contact.
misunderstanding. You're thinking why
No,
would we
I
send something to legal when we don't know legal's
I
making an issue?
understand precisely what you're saying because I had the same thing happen just very recently as well. And I don't understand it either because the bottom line is if those issues are issues, and I concur with you, those are issues that generally are initiated at the Planning Commission.
because those are ordinances that have to go to the planning commission anyway.
But I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Mr. Kingset bringing up the issue.
No.
I'm saying what's wrong is that it sits only over here, never makes it over
Understood,
here.
and
I'm not
that's.
saying there's anything
No,
wrong with
understood,
bringing up
and
the
that's
issue.
the point I'm getting at, is that does the city attorney attend planning commission meetings?
Every now and then. He was at the last one.
Well, it would seem
left.
to me, and this is up to you, Mayor, that it would seem to me the easiest way to deal with that would be for him to appear at a planning commission meeting and make that presentation initially there.
Well, if he's
So
gonna
she'll
make
all
it
be
there,
there.
he should plan on making it at ours too.
Well, no, I
That's
say,
what
no, make it at the planning commission. And then if there's anything that needs to be, you can address them to the council in his council report, indicate that there were issues related to this. It's been given to the planning commission, and we'll be working with them, and then it'll be coming forward to the council. Because basically, the actions, the best the council can do in most cases is that all they're gonna do is refer it back to you anyway.
Because we have to hold a public meeting.
Exactly, exactly. So it should, to me, and the order I'm used to seeing it done, is it goes to the planning commission. The council is advised that this is in the works, and it's in the hands of the planning commission, and council members can attend the meeting if they want more information as it's going through the process. But typically, they wait on the planning commission working with legal to make the recommendations, then bring it forward to the council. The council's just made aware of it, because the best the council can do is they're gonna end up having to refer it to you anyway.
But keep in mind, and I just want to be clear, we're a small town.
No,
I
I
have
understand.
no issue, and I don't think any of us have an issue with even a more informal, oh, by the way, this kind of came up at city council, because people show up, they don't know what meeting they're supposed to show up in the public. So they show up, no issue with them saying, wow, this came up, and planning commission, and I think it's right in the charter, take a look at this. They have every right to send stuff our way. It's the complete lack of that crossover.
Well, then what I can tell you then is if this happens at a meeting and there's an issue that comes up and there's documentation that I'm aware of that needs to go to the planning commission, I'll make sure it gets forwarded to you as soon as possible. That way at least you're aware of the issue and you know what the content is, and then we can at least initiate work from that point. I think the administration, since we're here all the time, theoretically, and I've got a planner that works with you, that we should be able to facilitate that communication between the council and the city and the planning commission to make sure information is given to the people that need it in a timely manner.
Okay, well, I'm going to say one thing to that point, and I am sick and tired of a certain person who shares information because we asked for it, because we've said, hey, what's going on with this? And that person getting yelled at and in trouble for sending stuff out to planning commission. Don't even.
Now, wait a minute.
Nobody even.
No, now wait a minute. I've been here for a week and a half, so please don't give me that don't even, because I don't even know what you're talking about. If
Everybody
you want to
else
discuss that with me after the meeting, I'd be
No,
happy to
everybody
know.
else does. There
Well-
have been plenty of times where Susie has tried, we've asked, last thing I asked for was, we were having a conversation about the whole thing coming down, because it was part of council about marijuana. I have a police chief friend in Battle Creek I went out to dinner with. We were having a conversation about all the struggles the communities are having. It was just general conversation, and I happened to ask Susie, I said, if there's stuff coming out and that you know about, I'd be interested in reading it, because clearly some of that's gonna fall under us potentially from a zoning perspective. I'd love to be up on that. She sent the webinar. My understanding is that was something that she was criticized for. She has plenty of time, told us about meetings that were going on that we might be interested in, or things that were happening that might affect planning commission, and then she was definitely discouraged from that behavior,
No,
from sharing that
no,
stuff. I'm not saying you weren't here.
No,
I understand you
I'm
weren't
just
here.
simply saying, usually when a department head or someone does that to a plan, I just need to be apprised of it.
But
so
you
that
weren't
I'm
here,
aware.
so this
No,
wasn't
I
you.
understand, but all I can talk about is moving forward. I can't fix the past. That same webinar, I just forwarded to the council. I will make sure it gets forwarded to the entire planning
She
commission.
forwarded to all of us.
Oh, did she? Well,
Yeah.
good. No, because it is good information.
It is, it's great.
I went through, in my last position, we went through the entire medical marijuana process, so I know what a can of worms this thing can be.
I understand.
But there's a lot of hype out there, and the nice thing about that webinar is it puts it all in context and lets you know that we don't need to freak out. We've got time to see how this shakes out, because we got courts, we got a ton of other things that are gonna
Absolutely.
happen.
But that was just all, it was just
Yeah.
asking for those kinds of
No.
keep abreast of it. But there's
No.
another that you, and it's not,
Mayor,
And
you
I
wanted,
say,
Mayor, you
well,
wanted to add something?
I would, and as far as my part goes, I mean, when that large lot thing, I mean, I knew that there was a reason that they did that, but I'll be more diligent when I see things like that, just to ask the question, has it already gone before planning? And be
Just my
respectful of
concern-
that.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but for that, my concern is that we spent over a year on working on it, right? There's a couple of us that are still, part of the process, right? And as far as what the intent was. And to hear at the end of it that there's no way of preventing a lot split, I'm thinking, you gotta be kidding me. We just had it in the intent purpose, and that is what we want to try and keep from happening, and now we're told that it's gutted. And the resolution is for administration to take it up. Where are we in this process and understanding as far as, look, we came to consensus as far as what we wanted. It was clearly put out, but in the end, it's a piece of garbage. I'm in disbelief over that.
And we had already told people no.
Yes, oh, yeah. And part of it was because it is in the intent purpose that we do not want properties to be split. It is right there, black and white, but somehow in the language, we can't keep that from happening. Well, what in the world did we do this for if that's not the case?
Well, I think in our case, that was Mayor Pro Tem, Matt, I'll ask that specific question.
Yeah, I understand.
And then it was, what do you do? But I was conflicted because I have, family friends that fought really hard for
Yeah.
that. And I believe in it, but I felt based on what the legal opinion was, I couldn't say no. But having said that, I don't believe, at least what I do remember, it's coming back to you guys. We said we weren't doing anything with it until it went to you.
My understanding from
That was
looking
the
at,
next meeting.
Yes.
That meeting, you resolved to have it come to you. That was in the resolution.
so on the 4th,
Then you were
right?
correct.
And again, I was going back as far as, I haven't had to go back through all of it, right? So my understanding was that, maybe it's been corrected.
They had the last meeting.
It was it? Oh,
The last
okay.
meeting they
I
resolved to
just
send
had
it
some
to us.
disbelief is what I was watching to see, this, big ordinance that's right, clear and center on the planning commission website now disintegrate before our eyes. And I'm like, what an absolute waste that was, right? So in reading or watching the minutes or the video, that it's going to administration, like, what are we doing here? And to know beforehand, we could have probably cleared up some questions as far as, well, what was the intent, what was going on with this?
But I would interject, part of this issue was, there was city staff that got in the middle of this.
Yes, there was, yeah.
And
What's
so
funny is
it
that had happened from October 25th. We had at least one meeting where that, is there anything new that's coming up that we should be aware of?
Right.
Silence.
And so from our perspective, there was a deadline date kind of running on it. So we were also,
I know,
it
and
was
as far as your position, where you approach to make that decision, and again, as far as the jurisdiction, it's all yours, right? I wouldn't want to be in your shoes,
But-
right, to make that decision at that point in time.
it should have come to you
But-
before it ever hit
Exactly.
our space, and
So
I know
like,
it
okay,
didn't.
hey, if anybody who knows, right, because I know that you were part of the planning commission when that homeowner came up and said, hey, there's a lot. Now, that's a unique situation. And
And
again,
his
these
would
are
have been
all
a great
unique.
lot. His would have been a great lot to split. It would have made perfect sense.
Problem
to
is
split.
that, and I don't want to get into the nitty gritty, right, but he has 2 other properties on that street that are exactly like his, right? So they cut that up, and guess what? You start the cascade, it's a domino effect throughout the entire community, right? And that is, again, the intent as far as let's keep this from happening. You saw what happened on Vincetta and Royal Oak, and that they were too late preventing that from happening, and now it's completely destroyed.
I'm gonna ask the
And we
mayor,
have-
if you don't mind, I'm gonna ask the mayor, because we're on this camera, about one issue.
We have one more thing. And this is how it's done.
Well, yeah, that was the other one.
Yes.
I know where it is. My apologies for being late, but I gotta work extra hard to pay for my buddies' social securities while they're down vacation in Florida. Just got out of work.
I'd be happy to accept money for a vacation fund as well.
I simply asked the question about was there a legal opinion, and if you know, if there was something that has been discussed publicly, or was certain things supposed to be confidential about it? That's why I asked the mayor about this issue that we're talking about here. Was there ever an opinion that?
This is, everything we're talking about was on public.
I just want to confirm. I just want to confirm that because we have a camera here.
Go ahead, because then I'm next, because I got another one.
Okay, I know we have a few sidebars going here, but getting back to Mr. Young's point about the point people, now we have legal counsel who will say is allegedly very familiar with cities, planning commissions, ordinances, because they deal with multiple municipalities. Now, in referring to the point people, that office should have been well aware of what point people should have gotten the memo, just like in corporate. You have your point people. In this case, it would have been, my suggestion would have been the mayor, the head of the planning commission, and we could have included the city manager on that. I mean, the more people, you only need 4 core people, and we could include, say, Mr. Elvis in that department. That's his department, I mean. And that filters down. So, I mean, that should have been automatic. There shouldn't have been just one group getting the message, or the legal information, or the suppositions that something isn't right. It should have gone to everybody concerned, because this is our community. And they should have known.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. McHale. I mean, any situation, past communities I've been in, that information is generally, especially if it's planning commission, it's been shared directly with the planning commission, FYI, to city council, just so they're aware, because it's going to come up the food chain, so to speak, and ultimately land in their lap. But initially, the work is going to be done by the planning commission. And to me, it's far more efficient to do it that way than the reverse, which is to give it to the planning, to give it to the council as an overview, and then they have to, again, then refer it back to the planning commission. To me, it's kind of bass backwards. And, you know, of course, I'm not the one that sets the process here, but, you know, that's what I'm used to following in the process. I'm used to following is to keep, and my point person would be Mr. Alvis, because you know, the bottom line is he's the person that works with you regularly. I'm a foreigner to you. And so he should be the one that works directly with you, and if there's any issues that need to be dealt with, then he can interact directly with legal and make sure that the issues, your concerns and everything are addressed. If there's any communication gap in there, then he comes to me, and then I'll try to get it worked out to make sure that information gets back to you all.
And I agree with that. Like I said, this being initiated from the legal standpoint, all you need is the 4 basic people that Mr. Haberman just mentioned on that. And that would cover everything, because from those point people, everything would get filtered down. There wouldn't be any secrets per se, or any hidden agendas per se, surprises, things like that.
There is one more surprise, though, that I had listed 3, 2 of them I did. We still have never been told about the Pep Boy settlement. So one day, the sign, okay, him or him? Because just telling us and saying it's up is not telling us. We were never given the legal
Mr.
opinion.
Kucera has all of that.
Yeah, okay, that's lovely, but this was months ago.
I agree.
And you're not going to like it, because the last time I read something from Mr. Kingsepp, it was simply a note. And I said, I inadvertently, I missed it at one meeting, I read it the next meeting. You called it.
No, I didn't like his note.
You called it a bombshell, I think, and everybody made a big to-do about it. The bottom line of that was that there's new businesses coming into town. He was trying to give us a heads up, look at the parking. Just a heads up, make sure new business comes into town. That's all it was. It was a very simple memo. I am aware of the Pep Boy thing. John sent me a letter to read at the meeting here. Pep Boys, it became a
Wait, hold on.
Okay?
If any communication is coming to this as a public meeting, it has to be presented to all the members of this.
It will be. I'm reading it out loud.
We're just doing it tonight, and we was going to do it again.
This is kind of what Chris is talking about, is there's communication that happens outside this body that is then delivered, you know, through the chair, which is.
After we complain. And time out, ZBA is not here. I was on the ZBA, or I am on the ZBA, And I was there the night we went through the process of denying that thing. We followed our rules, and if there is a reason it was overturned, the ZBA deserves to understand it. We deserve to understand it, and because essentially, if my understanding is correct, and this is what I tried to express at the last planning commission meeting. I mean, it's lovely. I'll shut up in a second, but we were just looking at a site plan for Wendy's. Wendy's has a pole sign. What would stop Wendy's now from coming back and saying, oh, you gave Pet Boys a pole sign, why not? That's called spot zoning, is what happened. Now, there may be a good reason, there may be all sorts of things, we might have to go back, but that happened in August. This is November. It is ridiculous, and I had to mention it, and I had to bring it up, and then we had to think that is absolutely unconscionable that something like that would happen.
And I guess this is probably back to our point person, as Mr. Habermas is, we were brought in because there was a lawsuit involved, and it was a lawsuit discussion. And so what had happened in the other places weren't necessarily, I shouldn't say it was part of the legal discussion, it was actually not, it was somebody from your firm that I believe
Someone
that
from my
handled
firm
it.
was handling that in litigation context.
It
That's my
wasn't-
understanding with Pep Boys. And that's why I'm a little bit, I don't know about this either, so.
It was not handled by the city, it was not handled by Mr. Kingsup, it was handled by their firm. And we were sued, and that.
And they settled. I get that. And it may have been for a fabulous reason. We don't know, we should know, and that's fine. I'm not debating that there might be a good reason for it, but two things had to happen. First, we had to know because we've got other things that come before us, and second of all, if it's because our ordinance is flawed, the first thing we should be doing is looking at our ordinance, and that is our job. We cannot do our job if we are unaware, and come on.
And I understand, I wanted to just say that probably the communication piece was the fact that there was nobody internal that was part of that settlement per se. You know, I mean, so that communication didn't happen.
You guys adopted it at a council meeting. You accepted the settlement in a resolution. How did that not filter through?
Can I not ask, because usually in litigation like that, and as Mr. Young is well aware, I'm usually involved in any settlement discussions as city manager. And
I don't know, ask them.
No, I'm just saying, and usually involved, and then once the settlement occurs, then it's a public document at that point, and then is shared with the appropriate parties. So I don't know.
That was months ago.
I'm just simply saying that that's the process I'm used to, is that I'm part of the settlement agreement, and once we do it, then we just notify the parties and we move on. And as you indicated, if there's anything that we feel that needs to be corrected, then that action would be initiated at that point.
I'm going to interject here based upon my limited knowledge of this, other than that I know it's in my firm and there's an issue. I believe there is an outstanding issue. I don't know more of the details. That's
So if there is, then of course, then that would be why we.
But there's a resolution on the council
There could
meeting
be-
that says they accepted the settlement.
And there could be another issue. That's what we would do because of this lack of communication here. We clarify that.
Right.
Explain it.
Yeah, because if it's still outstanding,
Because-
then of course.
You still let us know it's
It
existing.
lets you know it's outstanding. No,
My
I understand.
understanding is
It's just simply a
there's a
status
potential
report
issue
at that
that's
point.
But that,
And that is, what we have to look into as well too, and I do not want to further discuss.
And that's fine.
well, that's, and that, I would assume that communication would come from the city manager,
Right.
because they were part of those.
Yeah, and that's why I say it's, again, I'm almost reluctant to speak since I wasn't here, but all I can tell you is what I'm used to and the process that I'm familiar with and what I've been doing for a million years, it seems. But that, and if that's the case, if there's been failures in the past, then the reason I'm here at the meeting is, part of it is, I'm supposed to be, but secondly, to kind of take notes and see if we can clean up our processes and not become part of the problem, but become part of the solution.
So going back to the Wendy's, it was fortunate that we did not have their representative there. All right, and that's not something that we should be put in a position of fortune. Gee, thank God they weren't here, or else they would have been pushing back as far as the
Right.
whole side.
I get it.
We got lucky that they agreed to lower their sign.
But they didn't. It wasn't on the site plan. That's why we didn't approve
That's
it.
the point, right? So they were in discussion about that, but, they could go back and depending on how long they wanna wait for this, do some more discovery on their part and say, gee, you don't need to lower us on
We're not gonna approve their site plan unless they do lower the sign.
But we,
I'm assuming,
Well,
I'm assuming that you all are looking at ground signs, basically.
Monuments,
Yeah, signs that can be read from the road, yeah, I get it.
That is our ordinance.
And that's typical, most
Yeah.
communities have been going to those, because I can't, when I'm driving a car, I can't see a sign 15 feet in the air. At least I shouldn't be able to, shouldn't be reading the sign 15 feet in the air, it's supposed to be looking straight
But
ahead of the road.
at the end of this conversation, we still need to know something.
Yes.
Not tonight, this isn't the right place,
No,
but we
that's
still
okay.
have Wendy's that's gonna come back in front of us soon, and we still don't know what to do. So this is something that it should be priority one between council and planning commission, whatever you can explain, or however we do this more. I don't know, there's more legal
If
advice
I may
needed,
ask,
but
Mayor, if Mr. Young's firm is handling that, is it all right with you all if I communicate, get a status update, and then I can report it to everybody?
Absolutely, please do.
Okay, Carlito, if you would do that, my email, by the way, is citymanager@cityofclawson.com.
Okay.
And then that way, at least I can inform everybody, we can hopefully be able to rectify that issue before, in a timely manner for y'all.
And are you saying that the original settlement is not agreed, or are you saying there may be an additional lawsuit?
I'm looking at this opinion
Yeah,
that
he
he was
wanted
going to
to
read, that John wanted to read. John will answer some questions, but I believe you want a little bit more detail, and I'll get you more detail.
do we wanna wait for that? Because, I mean, that's fine with us.
Oh, I'm gonna be in, I'll be in next week, I can get it out Wednesday.
I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just saying, if it's not appropriate to read, that's fine.
I'm not a lawyer, and John sent
John,
it
can
out.
you read this?
John sent it out and printed on here on a diagonal, says litigation confidential. However, John told me that I could read this into the minutes, into the meeting. If you're so inclined to understand why that sign is there, I can read this.
Yeah, I just want to focus on the fact that that communication doesn't just need to go to the chair, and if it's going to be part of this meeting, I think that that's something that should have gone out to the whole group. But, so this is a trend, is that there's communication that's shared before the public meeting, and then is brought to light for the rest of us during the meeting, which I don't believe is appropriate for this body.
Greg, if you'd
Nothing
like,
to
I
do
can
with-
run copies for everybody,
It's
right?
nothing to do with Greg
so-
reading it, Greg, I just want you to know that that's.
My concern with that, I mean, not just, again, it goes counterintuitive, is that I'm concerned as far as, we have a pole sign issue. What will this do as far as being a public record, as far as, okay,
That's
lay it
fine.
on the table as far as what's the glide path for whoever
Your legal
wants to
counsel
knock
feels
it
this is okay. What I'm reading in there, what I read in there is something damaging, doesn't tell anything that's,
It's a simple, to me, it's
It's
a
not
simple
problematic.
explanation of why it happened.
Okay, I get it, so it doesn't expose.
it does
to
not,
ways
it's
or-
not any, again, I'm gonna defer to your city
Okay,
attorney
okay.
on this.
Okay.
I'm gonna defer to him on this. Based upon my review of this, I don't see anything in there that I would say to support concerns of disagreeing with that.
Okay. Because again, as far as one thing that we constantly bring up on our board is precedent, as you said, precedent.
And I think if that's what this meeting is going to do, is what we're trying to establish is how to avoid this moving forward, right? And I think the four, whatever it is, I said point people, now we've come up with 4 potential point people. Those are good steps because anyone can get this, all right? Anyone, the frustration with this, we all get this. Now, as counsel, legal counsel, there are times when I come in, I'm never thinking about you guys, about that. I'm coming with my legal opinion. I don't really know how the effect is. We don't know as legal counsel where that's going to go afterwards. We think we know where it's going to go afterwards, but that is something that obviously has to be kicked back and it has to be explained. And I think moving forward, that's what we're going to do to avoid these circumstances.
If it makes any difference, Mr. Shepherd, your concern was the concern of council.
Greg, is there an explanation on
Well, I'm
there,
just saying-
John gave, excuse me,
But
It's
about
legalese.
the whole deal? Okay, well, this is what we got to go on also, okay? So if Greg's got the explanation,
It's
once
pretty much
you let him
legalese.
read it, because then you can comment on everything, ain't no sense
It's
beating the
somewhat-
hell out of it now, let's get it, let him read it first.
It's somewhat self-explanatory, you can figure this thing out as we go. Okay, Pep Boys update. On June 7th, 2018, a lawsuit was filed in Oakland County Circuit Court involving the Pep Boys' request for a sign variance. The matter was assigned to Judge Bowman. This appeal contested a denial by the Clawson Zoning Board of Appeals in January 2018 of a variance request for the retention of an existing pole sign. Several issues were raised in that lawsuit not raised by the attorney before the ZBA. They were, the ownership interest remains the same, the underlying use did not change, there was no vacancy of use, and the size and the square feet area remained the same. And the sign was and is a lawful non-conforming structure under the sign ordinance and zoning code. Also, MCL 125-32307-308 and the zoning code classifies the Pep Boys sign as a lawful non-conforming structure with vested rights. In this instance, the applicant's attorney before the ZBA incorrectly applied for a variance under section 36-2 of the city code, which is in the definition section of the sign code. The following is what should have been raised by the applicant's attorney. Pertinent sections of the code. 36-2 definitions classifies signs as a structure. 36-3D determines that 90 days following the cessation of any business or related activity, a non-conforming sign shall lose its legal status and shall be removed and brought into compliance. 34-574, non-conforming structures note where a lawful structure exists at the effective date of the adoption or the amendment of this article could not be built under these terms of this article. Said structure may continue so long as it remains otherwise lawful. Section 34-575-3 governs changes to a non-conforming use. While the use here continued, this section speaks to the authority of the Board of the Appeal by general rule or making findings in specific to allow continuation with conditions and the safeguards that might be imposed by the zoning board. The point being that even though nonconformities come about due to zoning text changes, they can be continued in instances rather than vacancy for 6 months or more.
So, I was there for this, oh, yeah, all right, I read through them already, sorry.
34-579
Yeah,
is significant because there may be a change of tenancy, ownership, or management of any existing form or land use, structures, and premises provided. There is no change in the nature or character of such non-conforming uses, except in conformity with the provisions of this article. Again, an expressed purpose to continue the nonconformity where and when appropriate. New counsel who took over the case raised this issue. The basis for that argument was entirely legitimate, and hence the decision was made to resolve that matter without the issuance of any sanctions from the court. John King said. So basically, when they presented it in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals, they went under the wrong codes. They figured out the correct code,
Okay.
went in front of a judge, won their argument.
first of all, and this is if you go back, and this should be in the minutes, and I'd have to go check, but first of all, Greg specifically told them they were coming in under the wrong one. And he said it to them in the meeting. He said, are you sure you want to continue with this? Because this is the wrong one. And that attorney stood up there and said, yes, because he said, you can withdraw this and come back before us under the right one. He refused to do that.
Okay.
He was given 3 chances. He refused to do it. They left being declined by us because we could only go by the one we even asked the question. We had to go by the one they applied for. And I'm sorry, but that makes me very angry because we gave them the opportunity to come in front of us. Should never have gone, they should have just done what they were supposed to. Why did this even become a lawsuit? Well, why didn't they come before us?
You made your
That's
decision.
That's why.
You made your decision. They got a lawyer. They went in front of a judge to see if they could overturn it.
But you just need to know that, first of all, this was absolutely told to them by the planner, Greg, Elliott at the time,
Okay.
before the thing, during the thing, and with us sitting up there, told this was the wrong section to bring this variance request under. And we had no choice but to do it. And that's fine, and this is helpful now, because now we potentially don't have precedent that we're talking about, but we should not have to have gone through the process of being utterly in the dark for this long.
So here's the point, and the point we want to focus on is, again, reading this was great because we all had questions on it, but that's not really why we're here.
The point is, and as you talked about, making point person, but the thing is if we have a point person, but we're not getting this information in a timely manner, so we can actually act upon it, then that's the problem. So we need to find a way to make sure that we're hearing these things and not hearing them second nature, not hearing when you're sitting out in public and someone says, hey, you see it, you signed it, why did they do that? And you don't have any idea why. And people expect answers. So we have to figure out a way to make sure that we're hearing this information in a timely manner, so that we, if it requires us to act upon it for the planning commission, we can do that. If it requires the zoning board to act appropriately, we can do that. But we're hearing things secondhand, and that's just not appropriate.
you know-
Rich, I'm gonna ask you this question.
Yeah.
I think I know your answer.
Yes,
When litigation is pending, can a planning commission be informed? And
that's why I say everything I'm hearing, and I'm sorry to say this because I wasn't here and I don't want to sound like I'm pointing fingers, but most of this sounds like an administrative failure. And my apologies for that, because the bottom line is the party that sits between all of these bodies, not just you, but every board and commission, and the council, theoretically, the city manager is part of all of that, which means the administration is part of all that. And if there's any communications, particularly between board members and the council, we should be able to facilitate those so the council's aware of issues. I mean, let's face it, when it comes to vacancies, who does the information to the council that new appointments are made? The administration. I mean, these are ministerial functions of the job. And so we should be able to facilitate those communications. And if there's litigation going on, and I think that the planning commission needs to at least be aware of the status of it, I'll tell Mr. Albus he should be sending an email out to the chair, copy about the commission, so you all are at least aware it's ongoing, and if there's any status or anything that we can give you, we communicate it with you, and we copy the city council, so everyone is aware of what's going on. Just for particular, especially for that reason. I hate nothing more than sitting in a doggone council meeting and being blindsided by something that I should have known. So I can understand your frustration. I don't like it, and I know darn well nobody else likes it. I know the mayor doesn't like it. And if I'm in that position where I'm required to give that information, then I have an obligation to make sure that information is provided. I don't want them to find out and have a citizen complaint come up and have a citizen say, well, I talked to somebody and he told me that the council was going to take care of it and you guys didn't do it. Why didn't you? Well, what are they going to do? They're going to look at me and say, well, did you tell them that? Why didn't you tell us? Real simple. It's not complicated. I'm sorry. This just seems so much more complicated than I'm used to, because communications is really not all that difficult. I've got people working with you. I've got people, myself included, working with the council. I'm in the middle of all this. So guess what? Bottom line, the buck stops at my office.
And to address your concerns about the questions, I have been communicating with the attorney from my office that's been dealing with this, and it's my understanding that a stipulated order was entered several months ago regarding the matter. So despite my earlier statement, I do believe this matter is resolved. It's just getting to this point, so there are no outstanding issues, but this is exactly what we're talking about. That is that communication.
Should have been provided to you months ago.
Getting that and moving forward, I believe that's a reasonable request, and I think that's consistent with the protocol for city administration.
Well, and usually in places where I run into these types of frustrations, it's the communication issues. Ultimately, I find if I'm pointing fingers, there's always three pointing back at me, and so I make it a point not to have these kinds of things, because it's small things like this that can just grow over time. And it creates this vast divide. None of us need that. You come here, you volunteer your services to do a good job, and you want to do that. You don't want to carry it home with you and be aggravated about it any more than the mayor or the council wants to be aggravated. We have enough to deal with when we make the tough decisions. That's difficult enough. You don't need to be lacking information that should be in your hands when you're going through that decision process.
Yeah, we're trying to clear up communication, and there obviously there is a problem.
Sure.
That's why we're having this meeting tonight.
Understood.
My question is either Rich or maybe Debbie. I don't. who can answer, who puts the agenda items, actually prints out the agendas? Who puts those items on the list? Is
For
that-
you or for me?
Is that the city manager's responsibility?
City manager, and, I mean, this last time, I was surprised there was an item added to the agenda over the weekend, and I'm not used to having other people add items to the agenda without going through my office.
Wait, are you talking planning council or commission or council?
No, this is a council
On
agenda.
council and on
Council
planning
agenda.
also.
Planning commission, Jim will
Yeah,
do.
Jim does
Jim
planning.
does planning commission.
Yeah, it's two different.
So there's been a couple of things put on my agenda that I wasn't aware of until the last minute, and boom, here it's there. And there are items that I personally don't think belong being discussed at a planning commission.
Well, then, if that's the case, Greg, what I would suggest that, and I'll tell you what, and Mayor, I'm gonna offer this to you. What I have done in most of the communities I've been in is when I get ready to do the agenda, I send a draft to the mayor to review the agenda, just to make sure, and the reason I do that is precisely for what you're talking about.
Right.
I may think the council's ripe and ready to make a decision on a particular issue, and I give it to the mayor, and the mayor says, no, we're not ready for that, Rich, stay away from it, it's not something we want to deal with right now. So I put a pause on it, remove the item, and the agenda goes out. I can, and if that's okay with you, Mayor, we can do the same with Greg. I mean, they can be provided to you before it goes out. Have Jim send it to you, you look it over. If there's an item you feel needs clarification, but, bottom line is, once the agenda's been approved by the chair or the mayor, then it goes to then it becomes the public document.
Right,
and the
I'll hold any
agenda.
meeting, I'll discuss anything that's on the agenda.
Oh, no, I
If it's
agree.
on there, I'm
No.
voicing that position.
But I think, I think we owe that to you as a courtesy, so that, because there are, I don't understand the politics of everything, okay?
No, none of us do.
And, no, but you do, you far better than Jim, and the mayor far better than I, as far as what the politics of the situation may be. There may be something I don't know about, and so rather than go and sit there and open up a can of worms at a meeting, she can call me and say, Rich, we've got other issues you're not aware of, can we hold off on this for now? Okay, no problem. We're
So
moving,
wait, I
move
have
on.
a question. What are the, because we're looking at the bylaws.
But that's the way I'm used to the agenda, Greg, that's,
the bylaws clearly state for both council and for us what has to go in. So what is it on the agenda? You're just talking about items that under new business? I know you're pissed at me for the last meeting when I said I wanted to talk about this stuff.
No, I'm
But
not,
that's
I'm
okay.
not pissed, I'm not
I can live
upset. We had a meeting there was nothing on pending, there was no business in front of us. The whole meeting was issue talking about bonds. And as I said at the meeting, it's an
Oh, that was a different one.
interesting conversation to have about bonds. But as far as I'm concerned, if I tell you I want a bond, that's up to you to go out and figure out how to get it. I don't think it's our responsibility to direct that business person how to go get a bond. Anybody can go get a bond. So to me, that was not a legitimate thing it was all right, it wasn't hurtful.
Except two things that are an issue. Number one, even in our master plan, it makes very clear that one of the objectives is to help facilitate businesses in town doing business in town. So, and you and I were at that
Right.
that workshop together. So the whole concept of what's that pre-meeting, the
Development meeting.
thank you, the development meeting, and
Oh,
that's
yeah.
what Susie's job is to go to those. The whole concept of the development meeting is to give the potential business person the tools they need, and then to give them also the process, so nothing is a surprise to them.
Correct.
So every step of the way, they understand what is expected, and what is coming, and where problems might come up, so they're ready for them.
Correct.
So that bond should never, getting to the point where you're issuing a TCO and telling someone, and let's face it, these are normal people like us, they don't know everything either. So
Correct.
getting to that point where you say, oh, by the way, now we need you to get a bond, they're gonna do exactly what everybody else did. We're like, bond, what does that mean? Where do I go? What do I do?
Why I mentioned that should be part of their package. when
Well,
people
and
come in.
that's what we were trying,
And have
Have
that
a
come
check
in.
on it.
And I'm
Have a
talking
check
about
on
like
it.
a check. We talked
perfectly
about,
appropriate thing to talk about a plan.
Sure.
we've talked about it for 5 years. On the planning department, building department, I don't know, which individual. But I think that, my recommendation was a checklist.
mhm.
Have a checklist that refers to the page of the one item, and it's been 5 years, and that still is not provided to our new business
But
owners.
even
So
with
that's
the
not a
checklist,
council thing.
they still have the question, how do I get a bond, what do I do to a bond? And I'm always gonna say, customer service, what type of bond? Our customer service means we answer as many questions as we can to make the process as easy as possible for people to do business
Do you
in
want the
Clawson.
city of Clawson to endorse bond companies?
No, and whoever said that, we explained to them what a surety bond is, you have a there were examples all over the internet of these things in communities surrounding us, and we spent months asking Kingsup to come back with, because he inserted himself into that process, by the way, and he never came back with anything.
Well, maybe
We
I'm-
might
That's
be able to
why I
find
said like
one.
the guidelines, if you had like the guidelines listed on these are the different options,
We
and
made
then somebody
formal
who just goes out and,
A simple guide wouldn't hurt. I'm assuming any businessman probably has his own lawyer or attorney, and they can figure out how to get a bond. I mean, even as an individual, it's not that difficult.
Yeah, but if you have it on a checklist, then they can,
wouldn't
if they're
hurt.
reviewing it, then they can say, oh, by the way, what does this mean?
And if you had a sheet that said, here's what a surety
Yeah,
bond is,
early in the process.
here's where you might go for one. I mean, you just
Yeah.
give some
When
instructions.
we did medical marijuana, and I know that, you know, down there we have to do applications, and we did precisely that. Part of the application packet, with all the material that you gave them, included a checklist. So when they came in with their application, we looked at the checklist, and if everything was in the checklist, and then we went through the application, and the process was, and they didn't complete it, then we returned it to them, and we rejected it, you know, because here's the checklist, and you checked off and said you've got all that material. If you don't have it, I'm sorry, we're gonna hand it back to you, and you come back again.
In the interest
And it
of
makes it easy
communication,
for everybody.
interest of communication, to
Sure.
get everybody on the same page, everybody talking together and communicating.
Yes.
I was very proud of the fact when I was on council years ago that we came up with this development meetings.
Right.
The theory was, if I'm a new business and I come to Clawson, I can go into this room, and I can sit down, I can meet with everybody, all the players. I can get all the information I need from everybody. And I'm kind of disappointed that, looking at it, a lot of people just opt out. I would like to see council perhaps make it mandatory that these people attend the meetings.
I will say this,
Our
I've
new
only
city-
become.
our new
yeah, I've
planning
only be-
company said they
No,
don't do
I've only become just very recently aware of aware of this. I know that when I was here, we tried to get parties together, but this is much more formal, and I think it's a good process. And I commend you for it, because this makes it, I had a business person come in today, they met with them, they go out, they know exactly what they need to do.
well, I think
It
the
makes it
point,
so much cleaner.
the point being, you while you're here and a future city manager needs to lead the ship.
Yes,
and ensure that all the players are in that room.
Correct.
And so there isn't any, I don't get along with the other one
No,
kind
no,
of
no, no, it
concerns,
doesn't work
which
that way.
we've heard often, and so that's why they aren't all in the same room, and it's to the detriment of our businesses,
Mhm.
I mean, as the city as a whole, and so we're looking for somebody to make sure that that happens.
I
And
think I'm
going forward,
becoming enlightened at this meeting too, and it's good, because, the bottom line is I feel like in the term I'm here, Mayor, my job is to go and set the stage so that the permanent manager can come in, pick up the ball and move forward, and doesn't have to correct a lot of things. I'm here, and I did that in my last community, and I look forward to providing that. So if there's anything any of you feel I can do to smooth the process from our standpoint, please let me know, and we'll try to get those things adjusted. So when the new manager comes in, he's focusing on we got budget time, a lot of things coming up that he or she is going to have to be focused on. These are the types of things I can clean up in the meantime, and hopefully be able to do that for him.
I'd just like to see more people attend the development meetings.
Development meeting. Is there a set, excuse my
Thursday
ignorance,
morning.
but is there a set number or set parties that need to be there?
There's a date, it's Thursday.
No, I mean, are there
It's
individuals that are
it's supposed to be
charged?
it's gonna be
Yeah.
Okay,
an it's.
So there are
the
specific
engineer-
people
Yeah, the
that-
engineering
Yeah.
and building and the planning and.
so there is a list of
Yeah.
persons that need to be
I've
present.
never been invited to one. I never know what time they are, because they seem to change around. You can get here at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they'll say, oh, no, they're not here. Well, so I think it should be scheduled a set time on Thursday that everybody gets there. At our last meeting, we discussed it with Susie, and the development thing, and our hope was that she could explain temporary certificates of occupancy, excuse me, and the bonds issue to an applicant when they come in. Part of our problem is an applicant comes in and they want a temporary, they don't know what they need.
Right.
So it would help to us if they could give them a heads up, okay, you want to do a parking lot, come in with a dollar figure, how much that's gonna cost. Because we can't pull numbers out of our head.
Correct.
So those are ideas I think could be done at the development meeting, would save us a lot of aggravation.
Because there often is like, they're coming in front of us and like, we're not ready to approve this.
Right.
And they're looking for a TCO at that point on top of it.
And they don't, yeah, I know, I had the same, like I said, I had the same thing in the medical, you know, I want to use that, but it's a very precise thing, we're not talking much different. It's a very precise thing, and the last thing you want is you want to send them before the council, and they're not, it's incomplete, no, so we just reject it administratively.
Yeah, it should be a checklist,
You
go,
shouldn't
no,
see,
go, right?
in other words, we should be the ones that are rejecting those, they shouldn't get to you.
I mean, my company makes products as far as it doesn't get into a vehicle until it's actually green lighted, right?
Yes.
So the fact that we're getting, it's almost there,
No, no,
that's
no, no.
not acceptable.
Jim,
No,
did you have a
I get
question?
it. No,
I
I get
think
it.
Paula has a stand
You want to-
Paula's trying to get
No, thank you.
I would like to see, we have discussed this before, we would like to see a packet that new businesses are given, that would have all of this information on it, along with a checklist, timeline type thing. And then also have it electronic so that they can go online and see the
Correct,
status
yeah.
of their
Should be
project.
right off the website.
Have all of the
Yeah,
contact
yeah.
people there, so that there are no, there's no excuse for confusion, because we've also had planning commission meetings when the person has come before and said, I don't know, I'm supposed to do that. You never told me that, you know, and ignorance.
And they probably did
plays
get told,
well.
they just forgot,
Right,
because
but
they didn't
if-
have a list.
If you don't have a list, then you will forget, and some people are auditory, some people like to see something. All we have to do is cover our bases, it's not really about covering theirs, it's about covering our bases and making sure that internally we are on the right steps back and forth.
Well, I haven't looked at the city's website, but a lot of cities, they have a section doing business in.
We
And I
don't
wrote-
have a clear checklist.
No, that's what I said, that's the perfect place to put
Yeah,
that.
package.
So that's where you want a new business to be looking. and
John's
be
done
able
a
to-
lot of them,
Since my day.
and, but I don't think they're available on the website, those ones.
No, I-
They're brochures that he has sitting at the door, and they
So-
should be on the website.
Yeah, we should be able to scan.
We can't just go around saying we're business friendly when we're not actually, we have to be business friendly. I make a point, after we move companies in and around town, I go around town, I talk to people, like Noble Appliance, we moved them in. They got in there, I went to their ribbon cutting, I asked the guy, how'd you feel about Clawson? He's overjoyed, Clawson treated him really well. Haberman Fabrics treated really well. Zioli's Restaurant, very happy with everything what he's doing. There are a couple other companies I've talked out there, and they're not happy. Oh, you ought to see what other cities do. Other cities are much easier
Right.
to get into than Clawson is. So I listen to their gripes, I listen to their complaints, and other cities do run their business differently than we do. I went to Madison Heights, and before we had our last joint meeting here, and found out their planning commission meets maybe 4 times a year.
Right.
Pretty much everything else is run administratively. 4 people go out to the building, they look at the building, they approve the site, boom, the guy's in. With us, you have to come in front of us.
Right.
So it's a.
But that's part of our code of ordinances,
Right.
those require ordinance
So
changes.
in that case, Clawson may be a little bit more difficult, but we can afford to be.
Well, you know, and a lot of that has to do with this, I don't want to be mean to the size, but a lot of that has to do with the size of the community, because there's a little bit more intimacy, people are more involved. You get into some of the larger communities, the number of applications are so large that you know, they want to filter them down, and so they develop what they call an administrative level. Those become administrative approvals. You FYI the planning commission, so they're aware that it's been done, and if there's any question, then they can answer them. But then the items that end up before the planning commission would be larger projects, so to speak. In Clawson, you can afford, because of the meeting schedules and everything, to do everything and appear before the planning commission. And I think in a way that's almost a better way, because you're representatives of the community and you can communicate with people when they ask, well, how did they do that? Why did they do that? Instead of having to go to City Hall and talk to some administrator to find out why this happened, you know, why this moved in 3 houses down from me, I don't like it. You know, you guys are here. In a way, I think it's almost an advantage to living in a big city in that respect.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, if people are saying that we're difficult because we're maintaining a high standard,
You're gonna get
that's
that.
100% acceptable.
Absolutely.
If
Yep.
they're saying we are difficult because our processes are inept, then that's a
Exactly,
problem. That's what
totally
we need to
different
look
thing.
at.
Understood.
Right.
That's,
I
yeah,
agree.
that's two different things, yes. You're always gonna get complainers, I'm
Right,
sure, no
exactly.
matter what we do, no matter how fine we are.
But Greg, I'm gonna go
But,
back to that
yeah.
bond thing, that was the issue. We looked
Yeah.
inept because every meeting, the TCO and a bond came up, and every meeting, the person was confused. We looked, and we didn't have the answers, and we looked inept.
And they shouldn't have been.
That's why,
Yeah, I
that's
did.
why I kept raising it and said, we need to figure this out, planning
Yeah.
needs to figure this out, we need it, and of course, that got disrupted because, you know, the whole thing with the planning department and Greg leaving, so that process got disrupted. We have to remember that disruptions happen, but that was, we looked at parking, that whole thing, we looked
Right.
inept.
The business owner has to be aware if he's gonna do a parking lot, he has to know, coming into us, he has to give us a price, how much it's gonna cost, so we can put a bond on that.
But it's not just
Then it's up
that.
to him to go out and get the actual bond.
But a lot of that stuff can be done, it sounds to me like, and again, I'm not into all the specifics, but it sounds to me like a lot of that stuff can be done administratively, so it's done before.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, but
surprised.
the issue is consistency and transparency.
Yes.
And that is where we have.
I'm
serious
surprised more of
lack.
it's not done electronically, now with the electronic age.
I agree.
And everything. I asked Mr. Elvis back in, I don't know, August or so about how many temporary CFO occupancies we have. He gives me this list, and there's like 3 or 4 on there. And, okay, that's good, but it's not exactly what I wanted. And Susie passed this out at our last meeting, very small point type. And I'm sure not all of the temporaries are on here. I understand other cities, as a resident, you can go online and you can look in the building department, you can see who's building, who's tearing down, who's coming into town, who's going out of town. And Susie's excuse, I hate to use the acronyms, BSNA system. Some of you seem to know what that is.
That's a software system.
I have no idea what
It's
that is.
it's a finance software system that has modules that can be used for other divisions. And sometimes it's not simple. And the other thing, to your issue on websites, we were, in the last community, we were going to a new website because some of these websites, and I know I developed one up in Fraser, can get so convoluted that to try to put something on the website for, unless they're trained and have the code and everything else, it's very cumbersome and very difficult. The newer websites that are coming out now, if you can operate Microsoft Office, you can go and you can upload an website. Makes it much easier, much more likely we'll be able to do these updates online. I haven't been here long enough to figure out what the incomings and goings on the website are, but that may be an
But
issue that has to be.
I have to say one thing here, we are, in a lot of ways, it almost feels like we're trashing the staff and planning staff and
No,
stuff.
I'm not
No, I
hearing
didn't say you were, I said it feels like we.
Yeah.
I said in some of the things we're saying, and I think to be totally fair and realistic, they are all on part-time schedules.
Mhm.
We have a limited schedule in our city because of budgeting, and there's only so much everybody can do. And my understanding is the BSNA system has modules they can't even access right now.
Exactly.
To even do what we've asked for.
Interest is-
Which I wanted to address the fact that that has
I think
been
we-
the priority from city council on getting people trained on that system.
Mhm.
since
So they
we've
can get
gotten
the
it.
access, I mean, it's not even, they couldn't even access them.
Agreed.
Okay,
It's
I
been
just
on,
want to,
it's-
because this is on film, and I want to make sure
Yes.
people in the community understand that we have a very well-qualified and very dedicated and committed planning staff, and some of the challenges that we're talking about here, while absolutely legitimate and fair, it's not totally fair to put it on their shoulders because they are on a limit, I mean, they're part-time, we have a limit, and they have all sorts of other duties that have nothing to do with this, that they enforcement and everything. I just want to say
But I
that.
guess,
No,
my
I-
point is that they need to be trained on the system.
Great,
And that's something
absolutely.
that the council's really been asking and.
We've
Well, see, and-
been for a long time.
No, I was just, all I was just saying is I appreciate this information because, I want to, I'm going to be here for a short period of time and I want to try to give everybody the most bang you can get for your buck. And so the more I know about the loose ends, so to speak, that can be addressed, then I can, at least now I have an idea of what I need to do to try to get people up to speed. Because I concur with you, if the people we've got, and we seems to be a general agreement, very competent, know what they're doing, but if they don't have the tools at their fingers to be effective, then it's going to be a limit for all of us. And that sounds like and that's my job, is to make sure our people are trained and have the most efficient, or have the tools available to them so they can do their job even better than what they're doing now.
Or was Michelle? Go ahead.
Jim, go.
Are you also?
I'm sorry,
Oh, no problem, I mean,
Oh, wait, I got one.
go ahead. Anyway, just a couple of things. I mean, this is a great brainstorming session going on right now because there's many different items that have surfaced. The only thing I would like to do, and put them on a board and we could put some assignments on that. I just wanted to go back a little bit because there was a question regarding the agenda, changes, things like that. Now, having been on the school board a few years, we would approve the agenda before we went into the consent agenda items. And if there was something that would needed to be added or removed, it was done at that time, and then the agenda was voted on, and there's your public document.
Yeah, some cities I've been in, that is what, right after the Pledge of Allegiance and the prayer or whatever, first item of agenda is approval of the, or right after roll call, we approve
Right
the
after the
agenda.
roll call, between
Approval of
items
agenda.
4 and 5 on
Yep.
the city
Yeah,
agenda.
is approval of the agenda.
Yeah,
That's
and
several
that would take
meetings I've
care
been
of,
in.
It's actually not in our bylaws, so
Right.
that potentially might be something we
Do we have to
would
bring
then-
it up as a change to our bylaws?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, that's
It's not
something, but
actually-
that's something you all can do.
But it
Yeah,
would
we
be
can
a
do
very-
that. There's nothing wrong with that, it's a great.
Yeah, I think, and that, let's face it, the agendas are published, several days, even a week in advance, and things change. And so what may have seemed really nice to do last Thursday, this Thursday may not be so nice. And so you want to just remove it to, or something may have come up and information's changed, and it gives us a chance to escape it, and then just deal with it.
That's happened, where we've had to skip over an agenda.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's something
No, it's
to
a
work
good
on. Okay, just like Columbo, one more item here.
So.
Just one more
speaking of
thing.
items, Rich,
Yes,
if you could, I know that twice that Mayor Woolley has asked about the BSNA training that we
Yeah, I've
were
got
trying
that
to get
note.
secured. Twice we were told it was in the works. So if we can make sure that that is in fact.
That's
in the
item number
works.
4 on my list.
Because it was supposed
No,
to
this
already
is
be
good for me.
happening, so.
Yeah, no, this is
Point
good
of
for me,
order here,
because these are
point
not,
of order by Robert's rules.
yes, sir.
My
That's
second item-
non-debatable too.
My second item
You did raise your hand for a long time, so you can have a couple items.
was on the information distribution. Now, Mr. Young, you might be able to give us some insight in that. In that any items that have been distributed to members of the groups, they are legally bound to share that if it pertains to some of the items that they would be dealing with. In other words, one person cannot be just a single contact, or they could be, but they must share with the rest of the group.
I think that's what Annie was trying to say earlier too.
Yeah, but legally, I know as far as when I was on the school board, if a member got it, it was shared either at the meeting.
For
Or
example,
beforehand.
clarify what you're, in this, in what we've been talking about, what's a specific.
Okay, in other words, if there was
The thing that John sent,
Pardon?
the thing that John sent just to
Use this as a-
him,
this be an
or
example.
That
is
would
there
be an
something
example.
else?
That would be an event.
That would be a
And that
prime
happens often.
example on that. And like I said, especially earlier, having known and being astute to different groups, cities, municipalities, commissions and everything, that should have been automatic as far as distribution.
Which I believe Mr. Giverman's.
Yeah, that's my rule.
separately
My rule,
said
my rule
administration
number
would
2
take
is
care of
never inform one that
We've
you don't
already-
inform them all.
Yeah, we've
That's what I
already,
meant by the bomb drop. It was simply, we should have had that.
Yeah.
That should have been something he just gave you, and that should have
Correct.
come to, that's what I meant by dropping a bomb.
But I
in.
have to, just to be
That's my
clear,
question.
some legal opinion, that won't happen.
No, this wasn't that.
Right, I know, but the details of certain legal opinions won't happen, but you
But you
might.
understand,
No.
right, if it's not information that we're privy to, we understand that. If it is information we should be,
Right.
that's what we're talking about. And I feel like we've come to some strong resolutions and some strong understandings here. I feel good about this meeting.
Yeah, I think I'll just talk to Mr. Alvis and just make sure that once everything's been formalized, that it goes, copies equally to everybody.
I don't even know that Mr. Robbins is aware.
Well, that's what I say, I'll talk to him, because, the thing is I get information, and the mayor knows that I'll get something, in fact, today, interestingly, you mentioned the marijuana thing, and I believe I sent it out to the council today, because she shared it with me this morning, and I looked at that and said, this is exactly, I think, exactly what they need to see right now, because we had a preliminary discussion the other day. This answers a lot of questions.
But no,
Because-
I would go a step further to say that, and I don't know maybe it's you as the point person, that information is beneficial to city council, planning, and zoning.
Understood.
And should go out to all of us. I mean,
And she-
education should be shared with everybody. It
But
shouldn't
she
have
did
to
tell
go
me
to
she had
any
shared it with
specific
the
group.
planning commission. I was just surprised that the council didn't have it, so, and we were talking about it this morning. Huh? No, I didn't get upset, no, I just simply said, I told her, I said I had a white paper that I was familiar with from MML, and I asked her if she had a copy of it, because I didn't, and she sent me that, and I said, this is perfect, so.
But one of Annie's points is important, because what she just said a second ago, you said, you know, to have our, like Mr. Alva send us information, what she said is very important, and maybe
Yes.
too subtle. He doesn't always have the information.
Okay,
And that's not because it was not given to him.
well then, it's my job to make sure he gets that information. I've worked with Jim before, and so I know he and I can have that conversation, and he knows if he's lacking something.
He would do it
No,
fine.
if
If he
he's
doesn't
lacking-
have it, if he
No, that's what
doesn't
I'm
know
saying, if he's
it
lacking,
exists.
he knows, I'll make sure he knows he can come in, ask me, if I can I'll get a hold of it and get it to him.
But if he doesn't know it exists, how would he ask you?
Well, that's, and if I don't know it exists for the same reason, I get you, but I can't answer that. I'm not, unfortunately not clairvoyant or a mind reader, but,
I'm just saying, understand that sometimes,
Yes, ma'am.
even he doesn't, or maybe you, don't have the information to have shared with us. It is delivered to a limited number of people.
well, like I said, my rule number 2 is never inform one, you don't inform them all. I think you do that and you save a lot of grief with everybody. Because I'm hearing, that's what I'm hearing undertone here, you know, and it's just,
I'm
it's
telling,
just,
sitting in the middle, literally in the middle of both of you, these groups. That is what I'm hearing you both want, right?
Yeah.
And I believe that's what we're talking about here. And
Address.
I believe it's fully understood, and now it's working the details to get to that point. So, as my job as moderator, are we all hearing the same thing and listening the same
Can I
thing?
make a point of clarification? I think there's a request for the democratization of information. So point people can't serve as more opportunities to filter information. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Except for the lawyers. Sometimes we'll have to
That's a
filter.
given.
Right,
What
right.
I'm talking to is,
Give you
give
that.
it to the staff disperses it to the relevant parties.
Without editing, without anybody saying, I don't, you know, that shouldn't go, or I want to be the king of the information, I want to be the important person.
Isn't it not just a communication issue, but an education issue? And I
Yes.
don't mean just education about what's going on, but my complaint on planning was you're welcomed in, you sit down, you show up, you know nothing, right? You know no history about things, some things that go on for a year and a half, or have happened for a long time and then all of a sudden pop up again. So there's no history. You don't know the codes, you don't know the legal things that we're gonna decide.
one of these!
I never did, no. I did
Susie
not.
put it together for us.
Okay, and I'm not saying that I can't like figure some of it out, but I remember specifically asking Vidya, can you give us a backstory on this? Can you give us a little bit of history on it? Can you let me know what the points are that we would consider prior to sitting there and having to consider them? And I was saying the same thing about council sometimes, but probably not as much. You guys have tougher things to deal with, honestly, than council deals with, because it's more encompassing of so many things. Which is why these last few issues that have come up on council that were planning related were really annoying to me, because one thing I always try and do is, I think we should all try and do, is treat everyone the same. There cannot be a separate set of rules depending on who you are or whom you know. There just can't be. Yet there seems to be. And if we let a sign go through for one guy just because he has enough money to pay for litigation, we had this really nice guy who owned a business right down the street who was doing $1 bazillion in improvements and didn't want to have to do anything with the sign. And we're like, yeah, sorry, we'll figure it out, right? And that's how it goes. But if there were more education provided from building safety, planning, prior to or during the process, it would make all of this so much easier, and the communication would then automatically be stepped up. It wouldn't be just a matter of, I didn't know about whatever, a determination, because you would have information all along.
Do you remember the last
If I
conversation?
can,
Do you
so,
remember-
I'm sorry, Reese, if I can, Annie. So when you posed that to me, I understood it. I guess it comes to, when she's the no filterization of the information.
I'm not real clear on that. I just know that if I get information, for example, from from the attorney. I get a letter from the attorney, and it involves a planning issue. I forward it just as is. You know, if I'm asked, I'll give an opinion, but usually I just send it, just forward it right straight. I just got this from the city attorney, FYI. And because, you know, you're all adults, you should be able to read and understand just as easily as I can. But if there's questions or anything, I'd be happy to field it. I don't like editing things. Now, if I initiate the document, that's a different story.
But what I'm saying is, there's no reason for a memo to not be forwarded as part of the planning packet.
Understood.
Versus sent to one person to read aloud during a meeting.
Fair enough.
And that happens frequently.
Okay, well then it
And
should.
so then we don't get to have that conversation beforehand, we're not prepared for it, and then usually that party's not there to ask questions on
No,
it.
I understand that, and it should not be. I agree. I mean, again, to me, I made a commitment to the council during my interview. You know, I have two rules. First rule, the council's always right. Everyone kind of chuckles about that, but the bottom line is once they make a decision, it's done. Second rule, never inform one that you don't inform them all. And that to me is critical. No, I'm just saying.
The city
it's-
council needs to understand that this is a liability issue, and our city attorney is forwarding information outside of this public body.
Yes.
That becomes a liability issue for the city.
Well,
So if it.
that's not, you know.
I know, I'm just saying, this is why
No,
I'm
you need to
pressing
tell
this
them
point,
that.
I am
Yeah.
telling them this point, but I'm
Right.
pressing this point because this is a liability issue, and if something is sent as a memo, ex parte, outside of the rest of the commission, and comes up and it informs a decision that the commission makes, that is a liability.
Mhm.
So, there it is.
Well, it's the
on
same thing when
record.
you guys have ex parte communications, the same issue. You know, you create an issue where a business owner, when he finds out these kinds of communications, you're doing email strings behind his back, literally making a decision before you walk into the meeting, you create a problem. You will do everything you can to avoid those types of situations. We all should be sensitive to that.
We don't do that.
No, I'm just saying,
Thank
we
God.
all.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, no, it's good to hear, yeah. But you know, but
You can check out our
again, I
emails.
understand precisely what you're saying, because that should go with us
So
too.
the point people are good, but they should not be the stewards of all those other information. Anything that can be shared electronically should be shared with the group,
Agreed.
not filtered from person to person, creating other.
Where you get a third or fourth
channels.
party,
Correct.
yes,
And
I
make
get
sure
it.
that we use our city email addresses and not personal email addresses.
And by the way,
That's
I'm
why we
not-
created them.
yeah, I'm sure, and if this has not been advised to you all, one of the more dangerous things, and this is a recent Michigan Supreme Court, I think it's a Supreme Court case, and it involves email strings. We're all real popular, the city manager sends out email, copy the council, and then the council replies all, and then a second member replies all. Once you hit 3, you now are deliberating. I just want to make sure you all are aware of that. So we just have to avoid that type of thing. I had an attorney in another community just simply said, when you get to that point, get on the phone.
Can I
Just
correct
talk on
something
the
you said, Paula? Do you remember the last, when we had the workshop months ago? We were supposed to have more, but that never happened.
Oh.
One of the things that came up out of that workshop was the training concept. Because I raised it when I took your place, when I moved over there, and I was like, wow, we don't have any of this, and you even made a comment to me, and we talked about it, and then all chaos broke loose because we lost our planner and all that stuff happened. But the one thing, and the reason I pointed to this book, is the one thing that Susie was managed to get together toward that purpose was this book binder, which has our master plan, our bylaws, the ordinances, the enabling act, all of the information that if someone had handed to you or me when we came on would have been super healthy or helpful. So they actually have made a start, and we all know the reasons why very little progress has been made in any area because of all the transition and changes. But I know that she tried, and this is one of the progress we got, which I've used regularly, and it's been very helpful. And yes, it would be really nice to actually have a session where someone sits down with a new, because we're about to potentially appoint Melissa's spot, a new person I assume would be coming in. It would sure be awful, and I'm sure all of us would benefit from some re-up.
I go.
We've never had.
I go.
Are you all aware MML offers those on-site training sessions?
Yeah, but not specifically
Not
our
specifically for
ordinances.
our ordinances and our
was-
city.
Oh, your
And our
ordinances in your
history.
city.
And
Understood.
our, like the large lot
What
ordinance
was
is something.
specific about the large lot?
Good
Now, I
time.
went back as far as seeing what was the discussion, right? 'Cause you know, to Paul's point, is what can someone do? They know about large lot, they know that it's on the website, right? But if you go back as far as the history, there's one video about it. And that doesn't even involve any of us on commission talking about it. It's the laying out and feeling from the community. It's the public hearing. None of the other discussions that we had throughout the entire year plus is there. Now, it's a possible resource issue why we don't keep videos that large, because they're pushing gigabytes in size. I get it. Right? But at the same time, you can go back and understand the evolution of something as important as that and what the final outcome was, so that we don't get into positions like, yeah, why did we end up with 20,000 square feet as opposed to what we intended, right? I mean, was it just a typo we just completely missed? I'm like, at this point, I wouldn't doubt it, all right? But, you know, you go back, you know, my joke was before as far as we need somebody to do Federalist Papers for the city of Clawson, right? To understand, what was it you're thinking, right? It goes back as far as that lot. What was it that was special about it, right?
Well, yeah, I would say your point was very well made, so it was very important to me to have education options available to whoever came in from our planning firm, because I'd like to take that class. It should be something that's available to all of us, the planning commission, zoning board, you know, technically even the public, if they wanted to come out and find out what, you know, what's available. So I'm glad that the firm that we've selected has the options.
Along those same lines, as Paula said, that you put something on a commission and they come in cold turkey.
Right.
So I was overjoyed when you guys picked Gibbles and Webster, because they said that they will supply training for us. I'm also overjoyed that they're gonna be at the development meetings. I don't know how much they as an outside company can do to streamline our city to help us out, but in the long run, I think we're doing pretty good on things. It took me over a year and a half to actually use those video streams in there. Now instead of rolling out big blueprints, we can all see on the screen.
Understood.
And there's other things you can do with that. And I was really amazed when Mario at the last meeting picked up a iPad, and actually now we're looking at we're not live shots, we're looking at aerial shots of so we're all on the same page. That's technology is there. I think we should develop it more if we can.
Right.
Because a lot of times in my meetings, I see people sitting there on their phones and they're looking at visuals that I can't see.
Right.
So let's get it up there on the screen. I think we're making progress with that.
That's good. That's good.
You got the technology, use it.
Absolutely. No, I was very pleased. I got a thumbnail the other day on what we've got here. You're right, there's a lot of capability there that perhaps we're not utilizing.
It took a while, but we're there. I think we're getting a lot better at it. I still prefer a hard copy at my meeting, because there's times.
Oh, I agree. You wrote that drawing on my phone.
Actually, now I'm bringing my computer and
I've said that for a long time. Hard copies.
Yeah.
And we've referred to them in meetings at times.
It's too hard to jump around on a computer to see.
No, I personally, you know, looking at a drawing and seeing.
You all pick on me for
landscaping,
being old.
red mark as far as, you know, what, poor decisions were made when they came up with the drawing.
I'm going to interject here. I think sitting here as the objective bystander and coming in, knowing where this started, where we're at, I think communication was open today. I think we know we can't make final decisions in this current setting that we're in right now, but I think the topics have been discussed and we have goals to work towards. This is what I thought. There's a lack of communication. We've communicated. It's now moving forward. I think we're going to have it. You can have that discussion and move forward. Again, I've worked with Rich before, so I can tell you this, for those who don't know, he did listen to you. I know that, and he did listen to you, and I think, and you certainly can articulate your points over here too as well. So I think that is always important. Someone listens and you can make it clear what you want, and I think that's the first step. Thank you for having me sit in this position. It's an honor to sit here between you two, and this was good. This was good, and it normally doesn't happen like this. I will say that. Doing this long enough to know we normally can't sit down like this where it's this professional and this reasonable.
So we need to schedule more of these.
I think that's one of the lists
Not too
here.
many.
Well, you don't have them all the time, but you have these. The mayor talked about some issues before. I think those are important. It started the process. Follow up with each other. talk about issues, and continue this discussion, so.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
for your time, appreciate it. This meeting is now adjourned.
We need to
Do
make
we need to make a motion?
I move we adjourn the meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.